Perfect, Puneet. Thank you so much. So before we start, I would really want to thank Anuj because we always wonder that what is next in our career. But this is really interesting to know that your growth is not just horizontal or vertical. You have the option of exploring the different dimensions. So basically your career path is like a pyramid where you keep growing, but it's not necessary you go vertically up. You could go to different sides of the pyramid and still keep growing up. So that was really interesting, Manoj. Thank you so much for that. And
And Vishal, sorry, let me do this honors. I'm sorry, I forgot.
no problem.
So about Vishal, first of all, Vishal, since the time we have started Tech Writers Tribe, Vishal has been a regular follower, contributor, and keeps on. He is very active on social media. He keeps on answering multiple questions on the Telegram link. So that is why I'm mentioning collaborate and discuss jobs that need enhancement, knowledge-based sharing. So Vishal is very active there. He is a technical content developer and a local product owner. He has more than 9 years of experience in technical writing. He has worked in aerospace, telecommunication, and storage and networking domain. Currently, he is based at Bangalore, and rest of the things, I'll hand it over again to Vishal. Vishal, over to you.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you so much for the introduction. So, yes, like we all are aware that this segment is an open forum discussion about CLI documentation. And like Puneet mentioned it, that I may not, answer all the queries or questions. Hence, I request everyone to please participate and have a great, interaction. So just to begin with, uh, we we actually have two ways of doing it. I have a small slide prepared which I could actually present, and then we could go to the questions, or we could directly start with the questions. Whatever you guys say, we could do that.
So you want control to share slides, something?
Yes, Punita, I think that would be
Okay,
really great. Yeah.
sure. Please go ahead. I'm stopping.
Okay. Okay. I would I would directly jump into CLI. So what is CLI? Now, this is really interesting because CLI was something that was used before the GUI based, operating systems were introduced. So before the GUI based introduction, it was only CLI that people worked on long back. Now, we would have all seen movies where, there is a thief who's trying to rob a bank and he's sitting outside in a vehicle. He has a laptop in front of him and a black screen, and he's continuously typing something on the laptop, and then suddenly all the CCTV cameras in the bank goes off, and then the robbery happens and everything. So how does this thief control the CCTV camera? Well, CCTV camera of the bank. So, well, that is basically done through CLI. So he basically, uh, enters the server of the bank, and then he gets access to all the controls there, and then he turns off the CCTV camera. So that whole thing is done through CLI. But that was a very, that was just for fun. People, please don't try doing that. But yeah. So that basically is a CLI. So CLI is basically a text-based interface for communicating with or controlling computers or servers. So it's basically a black screen, like the example you see here. You type in command and it gives you a reply, or it does some action for you. So that basically is CLI, and the prompt is called console or terminal. Okay, now what's the difference between a GUI and a CLI? So when you say GUI, the word itself says graphical, so you have something to look at. So it basically has windows, different menus, and then you have mouse to take control or to navigate from one page to another. and GUI is most popular interface today, wherein the CLI is basically used for software developers and system administrator, and they use it to configure computers or to install software or to access a feature that is not available through the GUI. So CLI is mostly used by the administrator or some of the users who have the permission of using it. So what are the advantages of CLI? CLI gives you a very granular control on the OS or application. It provides a faster management of large number of operating system. Just with one single command, you could have management or you could have control over a lot of different systems. That is what basically happens in our offices. You have an administrator, he runs a command, and for example, say operating system image is pushed in all the laptops that are there in the office. So he has that fast management control. And you could store the script and automate regular tasks. So in CLI, you have this option wherein if there is a repetitive task, you could actually, script it down. And if you run it, it would automatically do that task for you. You don't need to, open the GUI and click multiple times to navigate from one page to another just to do a regular task every day. And the last important thing of CLI is it's used for troubleshooting. So whenever there is an issue in your system, network, or servers, then it's always suggested, or the administrators always try to log in through the CLI to check all the logs and then to troubleshoot. Disadvantages of CLI is it's not user friendly, first of all. And second thing is the learning curve is really steeper because you need to memorize all the commands, and the commands differ for different shells. So if you are in Windows, the commands are different. If you are in Linux, the commands are different. Or if you are in Mac OS, the commands are different. So remembering the command is a challenge. Now the types of CLI. So basically there are two types of CLI. One is the operating system CLI. Now, the operating system that we use, say Windows or Linux, it always comes along with the backend CLI. So for Windows, they call it PowerShell, or for Linux, you call it Bash shell. So the operating system always comes with a CLI command. So when configuring our laptops or our system, we always prefer having the GUI based visuals. But you have an option wherein when you log into your laptop, you won't get the GUI, but you directly enter the CLI. That's basically called server core mode in Windows. So you have that option of entering directly to the CLI and then managing everything inside your laptop. So first one is the operating system command line, and the second one is application command line interface CLI. Now there are a lot of programs or softwares that come along with the CLI shells. For example, you have Git, you have the Git GUI, and you also have Git Bash. Another very nice example of application command line interface is the MS Teams. The MS Teams that you are using just now has a CLI command option also. At the top of the screen, you could see a search button wherein you could also enter some of the commands there. So many applications also come along with the CLI. Types of command line interface mechanisms. Now, basically, there are three types of command line mechanisms. So first one is parameter. Now, parameter is again used in other slides also, but this parameter is different from that. So here we talk about a mechanism. So parameters are, so for most of the operating systems, there is this additional information that's pushed when you launch a program. For example, if you open the command line interface in your laptop, so the first thing that's written on the CLI window is the name of the user. Now that is something that the operating system pushes to the program. So that's basically called parameter type mechanism, wherein the operating system pushes the information to the program that you launch. Second is the interactive command line session. So here you enter a command, and the command prompt or the program responds to you. For example, if you say exit, if you type the command exit, the system would say, do you want to exit? Yes, no. And you say yes. So that is the interactive command line sessions. And third one is the inter-process communication. Here you have an administrator who takes control of a lot of systems within the network. So it's the inter-process communication. He could interact with any of the other systems in his network. Next is when to use CLI. So it's used whenever a large vocabulary of commands or queries that's coupled with wide range of options can be entered more rapidly in text than with a pure GUI. Now, for example, say you have 15 servers and you want to log into all the 15 servers. If it is a GUI, then you'll have to open the first server GUI, you use your username, password, you log in, then you go to the second one, third one, fourth one. But with the CLI, you could open the CLI command. You could say that you want to log into all the 15 servers, and you give the username and password and you hit enter. So at one enter, all the 15 servers would be logged in. This is just an example. Yeah. So that is an advantage here, and in this use case you could actually use the CLIs. Second is when you do not have sufficient resources to support a GUI. Of course, when you don't have the resources to support GUI, your system comes along with a predefined CLI interface. And the third one is a very interesting one. So like I have been using C++, and whenever I write a code in C++ and whenever I run it, it executes in a command prompt, wherein you could interact, you could check your codes if it is correct or not. So even for these programming languages, they use the CLI. Even with Python, if you write a script and if you run it, it basically opens in the bash, just to make you just to let you verify if your code is correct or not. And CLI is also used by people who have the visual disabilities, and it's because the CLI, you have a refreshable braille display there and they could read it easily, wherein if it's a GUI they could not. What are the elements of CLI? So for the CLI, it's the element of CLI, that is command line interface, is basically divided into three parts. First one is the command prompt, second one is the prompt, and the third one is your command. So when I say command prompt, it is the first thing that appears when you open a CLI. So for example, here's an example. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's an example of the CLI. So the first one, which says Vishal underscore Prasad dot my computer name. So that is the actual command prompt. So whenever you open your bash, or whenever you open your command prompt, you get to see this. This is a predefined one which says that the user is Vishal Prasad and he is using so and so named laptop or computer. Next is the prompt. So prompt is something which says that, okay, now the command prompt is ready for you to give in something, to insert an input there. And the prompts usually end with these characters. I'm sorry, the characters that we see here: dollar, percentage, hash, or angular bracket and everything. So that is a prompt which says that, okay, your program is ready. Now you could enter a text here. So, and these characters that we see here also has different meanings. So for example, if it is a dollar sign or if it's a percentage, then it means that you are a normal user. And if it is a hash, then it says you are a super user or a root user in Unix. And after this prompt is the actual command where you actually type in the command. So here is an example I took of a command. So the command here is ping. This is a command anyone can try in their laptop. So you have the command prompt which says it's for a user and host. So user is the person who has logged in and host is the system where you have logged in. And then you have the angular bracket here which says that you are into the operational mode or you are in an executional mode and you are a normal user. And then ping is the actual command. And then your IP address here is a parameter. So this parameter is a variable, it's variable wherein you could enter whatever IP address you are using. So in this example, I just run this and this is the reply that you get to see. You know, it pings to the server and then it calculates everything. So this is a little bigger example wherein you just don't have a single command, but you have command along with some parameters, options, and everything. So the vertical line that you see here, it basically gives you an option. So you say IPsec CWLC, and then you have the option of selecting is it CWLC 1 or 2. Then you say CWLC 1, and anything that's inside a square bracket is optional parameter. So if you want to just have the primary IP, you could have that, or if you want secondary also, you could ping that as well. And how to write a CLI reference guide. So this is just with an example. uh, so the way you write CLI document or CLI section or CLI command in a document, it depends upon the company's writing style. So the first example here, they write it completely in a tabular format. Be it a tabular format, or there are some other examples where they have put it in a different way, but the data inside it always remains the same. So some common things that you get to see in a CLI documentation. First thing is the command. So you have the entire command there, and then there's a description of the command. So what your command does. Then here you see an example, and the example here has an output also. So they show you an example, they show you what's the output of it, and then they define what are the variables in the command. So here there's only one variable, which is the username. So they define the username, they give a description of it, and they say what is the value of it or range of it, and if it is a default value. You see the same thing in the second example also. This is an example from a different company's CLI document, and it's the same thing. You have the syntax here. They talk about the parameter, which is a variable character, and then they give you an example. And even here, this is also taken from a different company. Even here, they have the same thing: syntax, description. The parameter is named in this company as specifiers, where the node is a variable here that they could select, they could enter. You have this authority here. This authority is again very important. So there are basically like the normal users and the super users. So this command basically is for a super user. So if a super user logs in, then just going back here, we would understand that the prompt that he will have would be a hash. If it is a Linux system, because he's a super user, he has access to everything. In Windows, we call the super users as administrators. And the documents in which you would find CLI commands. First one, of course, is the CLI reference guide, where you have all the commands listed. Then you mostly find it in the installation guide, where you try to configure something in, and there are a lot of CLI commands that you run. You find it in quick setup guides for a particular component like the routers. And then for some companies, they have the SCLI reference guide separately. That is SNMP CLI guides. That's they create it separately. And that is the learning that I had. Now probably we could start with the questions, and everybody could help us answer it.
Thanks, Vishal. That was very nice. So I think we have some discussion going on. So first is from Dishari, is CLI meant for only admins? If yes, the doc should exclusively go to admin guide.
Exactly. No, it's not only meant for admins. So like I said, you have different options of logging in. You will have different rights when you log into a CLI. Even in our laptop, we have the CLI, the command prompt, and that's only for a normal user, and he has just limited access. He could do maybe just see the statistics of his system, or maybe he could execute some very minor commands. But a super user or an administrator would have access to everything in a very detailed format. He could even delete a user, or he could even create a user through CLI. So it's not only meant for admins, it's for normal user as well as admins.
Great. Is there anyone else in the room who has some experience with CLI? Then I would request the person to take up this question. Any difference in Windows and Linux prompts? Difference between parameters and option? Anyone else? Apart from,
Yeah, maybe I can give some insight.
yeah, please.
Yeah, this is Rishabh here. So actually, if you're just saying the prompt, like prompt, you will always have a prompt in any of the terminal or a CLI interface. So for instance, in Windows, you will have a prompt and you will have a different or but looking prompt in Linux as well. The things that differ will be the commands that you will run on that CLI. So the set of commands on Windows will be different, and a set of commands that you run for Linux will be different. So say if I need to see the directory structure, so the command for in Windows it will be dir to get all those directories elements within a particular folder. And in Linux, it will be the ls command that will list out all the directories within the particular folder. So if you are just asking about a prompt, prompts will always be present. The only thing that will differ will be the commands that you need to run on the CLI.
No, no. Actually, my question was, say, for example, if I am a particular user and this dollar sign comes, so will this dollar sign come for Windows and Linux both?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah,
Okay.
it depends.
It
List of
depends.
I wanted to have a list of the different, I mean the basic list, not everything. The signs that come up, the prompts that come up, and the options that come up for both Windows and Linux. That's just the basic one, which can help me differentiate. Okay, this is for Windows and this is for Linux.
So actually, like you will see a particular sign. For example, in the slides also he showed Varun, I think. Sorry if I got the name wrong.
It's Vishal. Yeah,
Vishal.
no
Sorry,
problem.
sorry, Vishal. Yeah. So in the slides also he showed some examples. So in there was I think two greater than signs to
Right.
indicate like this is a prompt, and after the prompt you need to enter the command. So it's like that. So for every terminal, so he listed out some bash, Z scripts, Z bash, and all those terminals as well. So each and every terminal it can be different. And the best part about this, it's configurable also. So if you don't want the dollar sign, you can configure that in the bash itself, bash CLA itself to show say like two greater than signs or a single sign in there. So it all depends upon the configuration of the terminal that you're using.
Right. And when you are in the Linux terminal, then you basically enter as a normal user, and then if you want to enter to as a root user or as an admin, then you have to run a particular command, and then the prompt changes for you.
Okay, this is completely automatic, right? I mean, the prompt is something which cannot be changed manually.
You
Yep.
could, you have the option to
Oh,
customize the prompt. Yeah.
okay, okay. Wait.
And like if you want to see, you could, if you are running a Windows computer, just type cmd in the
Yeah,
run
yeah, yeah.
box. So you will
Mhm.
see the CLI interface in there, and you can easily uh, identify like what's a prompt and what could be a command, and
Right.
what are things in that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that will be really helpful for you.
yeah. Actually, I've worked on I mean, the Linux CLI command. So from that, I can relate and just
Uh,
trying to jump the missing pieces. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right,
Thanks for
right.
you.
So if you've worked on the Linux, you would have seen that when you enter, you are just a normal user, and then you
Mhm.
need to type the sudo space root or something, and then you become the sudo user, the super user of it.
Okay, actually, this step I have not done. So basically, when I have like I had a machine to which I
Mhm.
logged on, and
Okay.
then directly I jumped onto the commands. So that's
Okay.
how I executed the commands. So probably, as
yeah,
Puneet
because
mentioned, I can try in Windows, command shell, I mean command prompt, and try
Right.
on that. Yeah.
Right.
That's great. Anybody else has question? Ravi is asking any good example of CLI docs.
Uh, Good example of CLI docs. I would say there are a lot of docs. When I was trying to prepare for this session, I was actually going through a lot of companies' documentation, and I found a lot. You have great CLI documentation for McAfee documents. You have it also in Nokia documents. So yeah, you could actually Google and find it out, right? Even Microsoft developers guides are really good,
Right.
and these are
Yeah, so
Thanks.
something
that's
that's
Sir,
basically
I
available to
didn't
anyone.
understand the square bracket. That square bracket option, I didn't understand.
Okay, so what happens basically is, when you try to run a command, it's not necessary that, you run one single command in in one line. So for example, you want to, say, configure three systems, three servers. That's just an example. It's a very vague example, but you are configuring three systems. So, uh, with that square bracket, you have the option of deciding that, okay, I want to configure system 1 and 2, or should I configure system 1, 2 and 3, or everything. So anything that's inside the square bracket is an optional parameter for you. So for example, you say set IP for system 1, and also if you want to set the IP for system 2, then you'd put a space and you would say set IP. You don't need to say set, you just say IP for system 2. So anything that's inside the square bracket is an optional parameter that if you want, you could do it. If you don't want, you don't do that.
thank you. So
So this is the way square bracket is typed in this command prompt, right?
You don't type it in the command prompt. That is
This is
an
for us.
option you get to, yeah, you get to see, the users get to see that he has option of,
Yes.
configuring multiple things.
So in the document, we should mention square bracket so that user will be able to understand.
Yes, yes, you could
Yes.
do that. Right.
okay, so I think based on other questions also, Vishal, what you can do is maybe type in some of those links, okay, the CLI guides,
Yeah, I could
websites.
do that.
Yeah. Here in the chat itself, probably I'm not sure if part of those slides, but at least you can type in here and people can copy it. And because other people have also the same kind of question. Ashish has tried to answer, but some more will be helpful.
I
Hridik is
would.
asking, what about any style guides for writing CLI documentation? That's a very good question.
Yeah, like I said, you don't have a style guide as such because it's mostly, like I had shown the example. It depends upon the company's writing style. The first example that I had shown, obviously you'll have to use the STE or MSTP to create your sentences, but the way you present it depends upon your company. The first example, they preferred doing it in tabular format. The second one, they had it in, the text formats. So it basically depends upon how your company decides to present it.
So anyone else has tried CLI documentation and they have some
Uh,
other.
uh, Vishal, would you mind covering a little bit on arguments, because this is something what I use in my organization. So what I
Okay.
do, I mention the options in a tabular format, and
Mhm.
I have two columns. I have arguments and description.
Okay.
So would you like to? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
Right.
ahead.
I could help on that. Maybe Rishabh needs to support me here because I have not worked so much on arguments. I have directly worked on the commands. But what I understand is arguments are something that provides an extra data to your command, and the command picks that as an input. So the argument basically, in the programming language is something that you define, and it, it works on a function. So maybe Rishabh could help here more.
Yeah, I can just give you an example maybe. So say for you're just logging into a particular application, okay, and you need to enter the username and password for that. So that argument would be the username and the password that you will pass on along with the command. So that's what that argument is.
Okay.
Did you
Okay.
got the point? So say
Yeah, yeah.
like there's a command say login. So login hyphen u, then followed by the username, then hyphen p followed by the password. So
Okay. Okay.
What's the difference between parameter then?
that's a good question. I think parameter and arguments more or less are the same. if I'm correct. Vishal,
Right.
maybe you can help.
So yeah. So so like what Rishabh said was right. It's mostly at most of the company level they think that it's same, but there's a slight difference. Now, I'll give two examples. One example, what Rishabh said, that you enter the username and you enter the password. So username and password are variables, and you call it parameters because that keeps changing, wherein an argument is an additional data that's added. So for example, say you have a file, you have a Word file, and there are hundreds of lines there in the Word file. Now you want to count how many lines are basically there in that Word file. So you run a command, you say count wc word count, and then you say file one. So, and when you run, so file one is something that's stored somewhere at the backend, and this command would actually reach out to that file and try to count the words inside it. So that is something that's not variable, it's fixed, but still the command goes inside it and starts reading it. And similarly, you if you have 10 files, you could say word count file 1 space file 2 space file 3, and then it would start counting the number of lines in each of the file and start displaying it. So that is what I understand. Argument is something that is not variable, but then it plays an important role with the command. It provides an input to the command. I may not be clear. I am not very aware because I've not basically used it, but maybe we can all find it out and share
And
it in some other media. Yeah.
Ashish has answered. Argument is Ashish. You can speak up, buddy. Why are you typing so much?
I didn't want it to disturb the current. I was also listening to it.
Disturbance. This is open forum.
Please go ahead. Yeah, yeah, Ashish, please go ahead.
So what I was telling is like even what I felt is that argument is something kind of as you rightly said is a parameter, but coming to sorry, it's a constant data, not parameters are changing. Let's say, but argument is as you rightly said. Let's say word 10. I want to count a 10th word in a particular paragraph. So I would say that I would call from an argument, but it is having something of fixed value. Let's say like count 10 or something like that. That's it. That is an argument. But coming to parameters for a function, if I have to put let's say some logical behavior, let's say yes or no or true or false, then the parameters come into picture. My
Thank
understanding.
you. Yep. Okay. Anybody else in the room who has any question, any knowledge about this? Amrita has shared the description, a screenshot. That's very nice about the difference in parameter and argument.
Right, right. I think that's correct. You have a function and you call that function.
So Amrita, you have worked on this or it's just a Google work?
I just searched it online while Ashish was explaining it, and I could relate to it.
Great. That's great. Hey Rishabh, so tell us about yourself, man. What kind of experience do you have in CLI documentation?
Like I do not created a CLI documentation, but the documents that I work on have those CLI interfaces.
Okay.
So I do document those within guides itself. So like we do not have a separate guide altogether for the CLI. So it comes as part of the procedures or tasks that we define within the documentation.
Okay, so
Right.
yeah, so anybody else has anything else on this topic?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So, what is the use case of using CLI during an installation? This is one thing, and one more observation that I came across was there was something called exit command or exit something. I don't remember the exact terminology. So, like a little bit more on that.
Okay, coming to the installation part. So CLI commands are basically, for example, you get a new laptop and you start configuring it. So the first window that you get is actually a command prompt. You know, when you first log into your laptop, you don't have the OS installed in it, but Windows comes along with a CLI command wherein in that you start configuring. It's same with the installation guide. So when you are in a data center and your servers are ready and it's all connected to switches and everything, and then the first thing you want to do is to install your to come up with the server. Like you need to bring up the server, or you need to create virtualizations. So in that case, the CLIs are used because that time you won't have a GUI up running. So during installation, you basically work on the CLI and then you bring up the GUI and then you start working on that.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe
It is
Rishabh
very
has
related
more to
to
add.
MS-DOS that was used long back. I'm not
Right.
sure. It is. Okay. 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 That
Yeah.
clarifies.
Yeah, just to add on this, like for some of the applications also, like not everything is exposed to the GUI. So if you have a GUI interface and
Yeah.
you won't have all the other options present in the GUI, for that they provide CLI because that's not the usual task that they expect the user to do. But at times it's required to be done. Because like say some issue occurred or some trouble occurred, for that they provide some CLI options
Right.
for you to go in and just like troubleshoot the things or get the things correct.
Correct. Right.
Hi all, this is Pallavi here. So to add to what Vishal and uh, Rishabh has said, that in installation, uh, just a minute, I'm getting some echo. Okay, so installation earlier when I was working with the company, so the app or the tool had to be installed through command line interface. So the installation guide I did was full on command line interface. So it was a very good explanation from Vishal and others also who contributed to this. So to answer your question, this was while installing, there's the silent installation also. Then there are different types of when we are doing installation. At that time, it depends on company how they are installing, right? So my company had their tool or the app installed through command line interface. So, hello.
Right, Pallavi.
Yeah.
Right, because if you talk about virtualization, it's all done through the CLI. If you have ever used the ESXi or the KVM or VMware, so the initial virtualization happens through the CLI, and then you get the vCenter and vSphere, everything.
Yeah, right. Over to you, Puneet.
Okay. So that I think was a good discussion, and I hope it's helpful to most of you. And I understand that CLI and all are other such topics which might be a bit alien for many of you, but it's always to get some good learning. And if you're keen, then you can explore and further discuss in the groups also. So I think that's really nice. So thank you very much, Vishal, for taking this up, Rishabh, and all others for pitching in. And we have recorded this session, and I will be uploading this discussion on YouTube also. Other information is